Dick Enberg welcoming you to the Riverside International Raceway in Riverside, California. Some of the fastest racers in the world will roar down this track today, and before the day's over, you'll get a chance to meet some of them. Drivers like Chico Breschini, Tony Nancy and the Gas Dragsters, Don Prudhomme, Connie Kalita and the Fuelers, Bill Reek and the Modifieds, just to mention a few. Now, these racers and their teams have spent a great deal of money, hundreds of hours building their racing machines capable of going from that start, a standing start, down this quarter-mile track in speeds in excess of 200 miles an hour and times of less than 8 seconds. Today, we'd like to show you all phases of hot rodding, the people involved, the way they work to tear a machine down and build it up between runs, the stringent rules they race under, the safety devices they've developed, safety devices you and I use on our cars today. We'll see how they time the races and the difference between ET, or elapsed time, and top speed. And we'll wind up with some of the hottest drag racing in the world. But to give you a better understanding of today's racing techniques and machines, let's go back down Hot Rod Lane, see how and where it all started. Drag racing actually got its start in the late 1930s in Southern California when a group of would-be racers discovered that the smooth surfaces of the Mojave dry lake beds were ideal for automotive speed contests. Racing was certainly different during those history-making events, first known as timed acceleration contests, later to become known as drag races. After the war, the cars had changed, but here's a pretty fast chassis that hasn't changed since Adam and Eve. The big difference between now and the early days was in the engines, or mills, as the inset calls them, and some of the machinery making assaults on the lake sure look strange. And the drivers? Veterans of the sport, such as Vic Edelbrock, Stu Hilburn, Fred Offenhauser, Dean Moon, Ed Iskandarian, and hundreds more who became a part of the present-day multi-million-dollar speed equipment industry. Another outlet for the burning desire for speed and competition was the oval track. Roadsters raced in fierce competition on dirt and paved tracks, usually occupied by sprint and midget race cars. Roadster racing eventually spread to all corners of the United States and is still running today under the classification of super modified. A new concept of racing for the hot rodder was born in 1949, Bonneville. Born of necessity for the better dry lake beds in the Southern California area were being used by military services. The Ford flathead engine was the most popular mill for years, some equipped with special Artin overhead conversions for increased performance. Here's a fuel that's familiar to all present-day racers. Tech and safety requirements were just as severe in those days as they are now. The first events at Bonneville found cars of every shape, size, and description running for the record. Superchargers were even given a try in those days with a great deal of success. To get a record at Bonneville, a car was required to make a two-way run within a period of 1 hour, and the average speed of both runs had to better the existing record to be considered a new mark. After making his first run down the course, the driver is met by his crew. They quickly service the car, cool it off, and they're ready for the return run. Structural failures such as these prompted the development of the high-performance engines used in the cars we drive on the streets today. It was either going to blow or go, and when it blew, it was commonly known as a basket case. When you ran at Bonneville, you had to have a good supply of spare engines. They were expendable. Car number 15 was driven by Ack Miller, today a performance advisor for the Ford Motor Company, and many times a champion of the annual Pikes Peak Hill climb. Streamlining was inevitable if the Rotters were to reach higher speeds on the Salt. The first single-engine liner to exceed 200 miles per hour in the flying mile was built by Alex Exidius of Southern California. But the holder of the Streamliner record for many consecutive years was this twin-engine Ford-powered creation entered by the Ken's Leslie team out of Denver, Colorado. This car had to be pushed by a red-hot street roadster to speeds over 100 miles per hour before it would start. Santa Ana, California takes credit for having the first organized drag stripping operation in this country. It opened in July of 1950 for the first races on a paved quarter-mile long course. Suddenly, there were drag strips all over. With this outgrowth of racing activity came a rash of speed and custom equipment manufacturers. And a new magazine flourished, carrying news of the fledgling sport. Its name, Hot Rod Magazine. Today, the world's largest automotive publication. The need for better organization of the racing events existed, and the National Hot Rod Association was founded by Hot Rod Magazine, whose editor at that time was Wally Parks. Based on rules set forth by early timing associations, the NHRA established a universally accepted set of classes and racing rules. One of the top runners of the quarter mile in those days was the Bean Bandits dragster from San Diego, California, which held records as high as 134 miles per hour for several years. Now the exhibition stock cars go that fast. More and more people lined the quarter-mile sidelines each weekend. One week a spectator, the next weekend a participant. Who could resist trying his hand in a sport open to everyone who's eager to race a car or motorcycle? The formula? Simple. See a race, rush home, strip the fenders off a coupe or roadster, tune up the engine, then back to try it out. That's, of course, if it passed the safety inspection. More classes were added to accommodate the more varied field of cars lined up at the pit gate, anxious to try out drag racing. Stock cars were a smash hit. For the enthusiasts, only means of transportation could double on weekends as a racing entry. And if you had a car that would go 100 miles per hour, man, that was big time in those days. The urge for faster speeds prompted more rails or dragsters. Improved roll bars were seen as part of the safety equipment, for speeds with these machines were well over 100 miles per hour, with the 150-mile-an-hour mark a driver's goal. In these days, the most critical element of drag racing, elapsed times, were being watched too. A 10-second-plus ET by one of the rails was really getting down there. And during the early 50s, a high 9-second elapsed time was recorded by one of the early dragsters featuring a full body. That ET by one of the pioneer racing teams gave notice of future elapsed times in the quarter mile from a standing start. These were the early days, a form of racing soon to grow and become one of America's most popular automotive sports. Well, now we've talked about the history of hot rod racing. Let's examine the dragster of today. You might recall one of the names we mentioned was that of Wally Parks. Well, Wally today is president of the National Hot Rod Association, and he's here now talking with Chuck Griffith about this fine rail job. Wally, come over and chat with us. Nice to have you with us today.
Thank you, Dick. Glad to be here.
Wally, we've talked about the history of this sport. Is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
Well, I'd just like to add that I think it's not only the noisiest sport in existence, but certainly the fastest growing one.
I understand that Detroit has taken a close look at the young men that have come up through the ranks and have styled these machines and made improvements that all of us are taking advantage of right now.
Well, Detroit has been active as far as watching the sport for a long time, but today we find that an awful lot of the people have graduated from the hot rod ranks into the automotive industries, and we find also that many of the manufacturers are taking active part in producing equipment that runs awful good.
Wally, in the evolution of the sport, this is one of the things that has developed. The rail job, it's the fastest of the machines, is it not?
Yeah, it's kind of like the quarter horse is in the the horse world. It's been developed for the purpose of going as fast as possible in a quarter of a mile.
Wally, I know since the formation of the National Association, you've emphasized safety. I'd like perhaps at this time for you to point out to the people what are the safety features in this machine.
Well, this one, most of the safety is built around the driver's cockpit. We start out with the roll bar on the top, which has been a standard requirement in hot rodding since the early 40s. This one encases the driver's head, which is in a helmet, and you'll notice that the thing is padded. We have a requirement that states that the cockpit has to be properly padded for insulation for the driver. Down inside, we've got shoulder straps, seat belt on a quick release basis there to hold the driver firmly in the seat. Now, most of this is in here to protect him in case he gets on a rough course, more than capsizing, because we seldom have accidents, I'm happy to say. We have a parachute release ring down in the bottom that the driver uses and pulls just as soon as he completes his quarter-mile run, and this pops the parachute out the back, which unfolds and brings him to a stop. In addition to that, of course, he has his brake here that he uses for additional stopping, and very fine disc brakes mounted on the rear wheels.
So he is well protected indeed.
Yes, he is.
Wally, I'm amazed at how simple the controls are on these machines.
Well, the driver's pretty busy in there, running for about 7.5 seconds. Actually, it's as basic as you can get. You've got a clutch pedal on the left, which he releases. You've got a fuel pedal on the right that he presses down, and a steering wheel that he holds on to. Actually, there are no gears to shift in the thing. This is a handbrake for stopping in addition to the parachute. And then, of course, he has the switch kill button and the parachute release in there, and that's all. He doesn't have any instruments to read that he pays attention to, because in that 7.5 seconds, he's a pretty busy man.
Wally, let's move from the cockpit to the engine. This is the baby that makes the money for the driver. Tell us a little bit about the engineering of this machine.
Well, the engine basically on this one is a Chrysler, which is one of the very popular engines in modern drag racing. Sitting on top of the engine here is what we call a blower, which is a GMC supercharger, such as is used on trucks and excavation diesel equipment. On top of that is what we call the bug catcher generally. It's actually the air induction valves here. This one happens to be a Hilburn.
How about these tubes down here?
Now, those are the Zoomy. That's a new style of exhaust that's been developed, and it kicks the exhaust up, which gives some downward thrust on the car. Also helps clear the smoke from the tires away from the driver. And then when we get on the back, well, this is the good old mag that provides the ignition on many of these cars. And over here is the fuel shut-off valve that the driver uses when he completes his run to shut the fuel off from the engine.
Wally, I noticed the tires do not have tread. Isn't that unusual?
Well, it looks unusual, but actually this type of tire has been developed purely for drag racing, and the purpose is to get just as much rubber on the asphalt as you can for traction. You'll notice the little holes in here. These are simply inspection holes so they can tell how deep the tread is. But basically, this type of tire with its soft rubber compound is the thing that gets them off the line and puts them through the quarter mile as fast as they go.
And these long pieces of metal here, undoubtedly, that's where the machine gets its name, the rail job.
Well, originally those pieces of metal were Model T frame rails, and they have developed into the fine tubing construction we have now, but that's where it got the rail name.
And up front, the wheels all appear like bicycle wheels.
Well, they appear to be bicycle or motorcycle wheels, and they, again, have been specially developed here with wider and stronger hubs and spokes in the things. They carry very little weight. Most of the weight is on the back of the car, and they simply serve to steer the thing with a light touch by the driver.
Well, Wally, very interesting. You've pointed out the safety features, the engineering features of this rail job. Let's go out to the track and see them in action.
All right, let's try.
Thousands of fans throng the gates of a drag strip on Sunday afternoon in all parts of the country. The reason? Simple. Who can resist those tire-burning dragsters in the closely matched contest between the ever-popular stockers? It all adds up to a thrill-a-second spectacular. The pits, too, are of interest to the spectator, for here he gets a close-up of the machinery soon to be seen in action. And he might sneak a peek inside one of the machines while it's torn down, being readied for the next race. Mother often gets into the act. She mixes the critical blends of fuel as if preparing baby's formula. These exotic blends of high-energy fuel are a vital contribution to those unbelievable speeds. Drag racers travel all over the country to compete in major events. Drivers like Joe Schubeck from Lakewood, Ohio, travel from coast to coast in a few months' time to compete in the big races, such as Hot Rod Magazine's second annual championship here at Riverside. Schubeck is one of hundreds of professional drag racers in the United States, all of whom make their living by driving the fast rails for prize money. First job for crewmen after the car is rolled off the trailer is a complete preliminary checkout of all components, including spark plugs, valve settings, tire pressures, and countless other areas of importance. Drag racing in this category requires continual attention to every working part of the engine and chassis. Before racing, all cars must complete a technical inspection and classification. Weight plays an important part in racing, for it determines into which class the car will compete in relation to the cubic inch displacement of the engine or its horsepower. Thus, all cars are classed for the fairest competition within a given category. More than 76 classes of competition are offered at a major drag race. There's a place for everyone to compete. If one engine won't do it, try two. That framework holds a streamlined body when this car makes all-out speed runs. By mid-morning, the pits buzz with activity. Classification, inspection, repair, and tune-up, the pattern. Parachutes play an important part in stopping cars that travel more than 140 miles per hour. In addition to the chutes, the conventional passenger car brakes are used. The chute must be inspected, repacked after each run. It's a vital piece of equipment on any competition car. Prior to the actual races, drivers get together for the traditional drivers' meeting, where strip rules are reviewed and the elimination procedures announced. Quite often, the meeting will also find drivers drawing lots to find out who their opponents will be in the first round of racing. The starting system is clearly defined, as is the foul system and strip ground rules. Now, these very important rules must be clearly understood, for in drag racing, the prizes are very generous.
Nobody pushes the car through. His own power. That's the guy coming up to the last round, and one guy brakes on the line, the other guy comes off the line and brakes. He has to push it.
After the meeting, back to the pits and ready the car for eliminations. There's money to be made, with top prizes reaching thousands of dollars in value. We've talked about the engineering efficiency of the machine itself and the psychological readiness of the driver, and that takes us right here to the starting line. As they start here and drag a quarter mile down this track, the most important device to the driver is this machine. It's called a Christmas tree for obvious reasons, and that's what gets him or her started. And to tell you how it operates, let's call in the publisher of Hot Rod Magazine, Mr. Ray Brock. Ray, just how does this contraption operate?
Dick, we have staging lights at the top, a pre-stage and a stage. We'll turn them both out, and then we'll ask a couple of fellows to step in the lights and the pre-stage lights, fellas. Okay, now we move up into the stage lights. We have both these lights lit. That means they're ready to go. I turn on the switch on this box, and the countdown starts at half-second intervals. The green light goes on, and away they go. Now, if they happen to go a little bit too early, then they're in trouble. We'll redo this again, and we'll have the fellow on the left go through the beam a little bit too early, and he's in trouble. Okay, fellas, here we go.
And
he's out. He fouled out. So that's the way the Christmas tree works. It's a highly technical electronic system, but it's also highly accurate.
Now, Ray, we've talked about elapsed time and top speed. Could you explain the difference there?
Yes, this drag strip is a quarter of a mile long. The elapsed time is the length of time it takes to go from the start to the finish. And that's it. We get some of our hotter dragsters down around 7.5 seconds.
How about the top speed?
Top speed is measured at the finish line with a set of traps just straddling the finish line, and that gives you the top speed at that point.
By noon, everyone's ready to go, and the spectators are treated. Oh, what a treat. A look at the Queen, shown here with Bob Peterson, founder of Hot Rod Magazine. Next comes Perky Patty, the Hearst Shifter Queen. And there are the beautiful street roadsters that still thrill custom car show and race fans of all ages. The parade also includes a look at the drivers to be seen in competition. Here we see the notables of drag racing, such as Connie Coletta with his Ford-powered dragster, Tom McEwen, Norm Weekly, George Bolthoff, Chuck Griffith, Danny Ongayas, Tony Nancy, Don Prudhomme, Harold Amix, and there are hundreds more. Out of the dozens of fuel dragsters that enter a major drag racing event, only 32 will have a chance at the eliminations. They must qualify with a low elapsed time to get one of the 32 spots, which entitles them to run for the money, and there's plenty of it to be won. In drag racing, even the losers receive some compensation to offset the cost of competition, for it costs upwards of $75 to $100 to make a single run in one of today's fuel dragsters. How do you go racing? Well, first, the car must be registered so that all of its times and speeds recorded are furnished to the right driver and his mechanics, later to be used as a guide in their tune-up work. And after all of the book work is out of the way, trailer it into the inspection area for a wait in line and some bench racing with fellow racers. Comparing notes isn't uncommon, for drag racers are a friendly group, eager to help one another with tips on performance and even supplying parts when an opponent gets into trouble with broken equipment. First, the scales, for weight will determine the class. Trained officials carefully work the scales to be sure everything's on the up and up. The car is weighed both with and without the driver for an accurate measure. Next, the critical safety inspection, where experts such as Jim Dale, a professional drag racing tech man, combs the car to detect the slightest flaw or rules infraction, which could be reason for a mishap at high speeds. If you can't make it through this line, you just don't race until everything's fixed up. Once the tech man signs his name on the dotted line and gives the driver his okay, it's time to get busy. There's racing to be done. There are 13 different categories in which a car can compete in drag racing, and more than 70 classes in those categories. Each car must be clearly numbered, and the class and category of competition must be easy to see, for the complexities of efficient recording demand quick identification of a car. When the car pulls to the starting line, recorders quickly enter the class and number on their timing sheet, and as soon as the car completes its run, the elapsed time and speed are entered. The driver receives a copy of this information on a time slip, which can be used as the final judge in a car's performance. As we mentioned earlier, everything must be checked before a race, and since the drag racing machines only run for a short time, they carry very little fuel. Refueling between each run is usually necessary. In drag racing, the safety of the driver is of utmost importance. Here, driver Les Allen gets ready for a run. He must first get into his driving suit, which is fully insulated and heat reflective to protect him in the event of a fire. Drivers must wear leather shoes, preferably boots, and to complete the protection, a fireproof face mask is also used with goggles, and then the crash helmet, which is jokingly referred to by the drivers as a lid skid. Seem like a lot of trouble? Well, imagine traveling at 200 miles per hour and a fire breaks out right in front of you. That fire suit could save a life. The car, too, is well equipped for protection. The driver's head fits into a compartment just below the roll bar, and he's tightly strapped in with shoulder harness and seat belts in case of a rollover. Into the staging lights.
We followed 16-year-old Les Allen into Riverside International Raceway. Since he began this morning, he's just completed his first run. Les, you've just turned in a time of 169 miles per hour. Are you happy with your run?
Well, we expect more than that.
I know you've only had this machine in operation for a little over a month. You yourself have only been driving for 4 or 5 months. What do you anticipate as being the top speed?
Well, 180 Should be the top, 185.
180, 185. How many times a month do you plan to drive this A-fuel dragster?
How many times a month? Well, every weekend, 5 times a day.
You feel you're learning each time you handle the wheel?
You learn every time.
What are the things you feel you have to work on most?
Well, just controlling the car mostly.
Well, let's hope we see you soon in the victory circle.
Okay.
Qualifying runs for a place in the elimination finals are as hard on the car as the actual racing. Equipment sometimes lets go, as they say, but it's quickly repaired right there in the pits. The stock car. Hundreds of them flock into the staging lanes when the call comes for time trials, for the stockers, like the hot modified cars, need plenty of practice runs too. The rhythmic pattern continues. Run after run after run to squeeze every ounce of performance the engine has to offer. You got to have a racer to go to the drags. If the push truck will go, enter it. Run for a trophy. Does she or doesn't she? Only her mechanic knows for sure. Shirley Shahan, a housewife with 3 children and a real drag racing enthusiast. That big super stocker is just the thing for quick trips to the supermarket.
Now let's talk to the fastest lady on the track today. The women as well as the men enjoy the drag racing. Shirley Shahan, who has recorded the fastest time and undoubtedly will remain as the ladies' champion here at the track. Congratulations, Shirley.
Thank you very much.
I know this question is asked often. How does a woman get started in drag racing?
Husband,
A husband. And how do you like it?
I like it real well.
Do you take a lot of kidding from the men?
Quite a bit.
Especially when you beat them.
Yeah, they get used to it after a while, though.
Oh, you plan to continue to beat them?
As much as we can.
Well, good. We'll continue to look for you then in the victory circle.
Now that the class eliminations are underway, the cars are running on a round-robin system of competition. 2 cars at a time, run after run. The winner of a heat moves up to challenge another round winner until eventually there are just 2 cars to go for the trophy in each class. The fans really come out of their shoes when the big stockers crank off the line. 126 miles per hour in the drag strip quarter mile isn't exactly letting grass grow under your feet, and many of these cars are identical to the one that you drive daily. In addition to the stock classes, the factory experimental cars thrill the crowd as they lunge off the starting line and blast to 130 miles per hour. Here's a hot entry. The little old lady from Pasadena. If this next car looks... Tony Nancy, a young Southern Californian who's been driving his 22 junior dragsters for years. He's one of those who favors the gas dragsters. They don't go as fast as the fuelers, usually about 190 miles per hour, but their show of racing skill is equally as exciting as the Big Brother fuel cars, with elapsed times for the 1,320-foot distance hovering in the 8-second bracket. Crowd is tense. Drivers ready. All stations go. This is more than physical and machine. Emotions play an integral part as well. Let's find out what a driver feels as he anticipates his turn at the starting gate. Here's Gentleman Joe Schubeck from Ohio. Joe, what do you feel as you anticipate your turn?
Well, sitting in the staging area waiting for the race to start gets a little nerve-wracking, butterflies and all that, but once you get up there on the starting line and the Christmas tree starts coming down, I think it all leaves you and it's over before you know it, and it's just kind of a funny feeling. I like it.
Don Prudhomme.
I feel as though I've been preparing myself pretty good for this big championship race out here this weekend. There's a lot of fast cars out there running. We hope to jump right in the middle of the best of them and win this big meet.
Tom McEwen.
Well, we're really up for this race. The car is the new motor, new tires. We've been practicing as much as we can on it. We hold a strip record out here, and I feel that we're the one to beat. The starting system, I feel that I have it down real well, and the other drivers are going to have to beat me, get the money out here. I feel.
From Portland, Oregon, Ed McCullough.
It's a big race. You get tense before a race. When the car fires, you're ready to go. I'm ready when the car fires. The next thing to do is make a race out of it and go.
Big meet. Cars run down the drag strip every 28 to 34 seconds. Upon completion of a run, the driver stripped off his helmet, face mask, and fire suit. Then he and his crew members will look over the time slip and discuss problems if the readings were bad. Next, back to the pits where the engine is allowed to cool before making another run. The chute must be inspected and repacked. All final adjustments made, then back for another run. As advertised, all the hot dogs are here today. Popular Connie Coletta with his supercharged Ford dragster all the way from Mount Clemens, Michigan. Connie's car is one of the nation's fastest and quickest with elapsed times under 8 seconds and speeds way over 200 miles per hour. Connie is one of the sport's superstars. Like the other fuel dragsters, Connie's car weighs just slightly more than 1,000 pounds, and the engine puts out more than 1,000 horsepower. How about cost? Well, these dragsters are valued at more than $10,000, and that figure doesn't include the extra engines that are needed. Some of the engines are good only for a dozen races. Watch this run. In the following slow-motion sequence, you'll see the smoke boil off the tires and can imagine how quickly one of these drivers must react if they should get into trouble. The National Hot Rod Association record holder for speed is Connie Kalita in the Bounty Hunter at 206.44 miles per hour. Connie's just made a run and ran into some tough luck at the start. Connie, what happened?
We broke an axle shaft. It's the first time I've busted one in about 3 years.
We have that right behind you. Let's take a look at it.
Yes, here it is right here, Dick. We just sheared it off with a nice clean break. We've got quite a bit of traction up here today, and it's giving us a slight problem.
You said you had new tires, and that was part of the problem.
Yes, it was.
You just got too much traction and just cut it right in half.
Well, it's either too much traction or not enough horsepower, one or the other.
You're not going to blame it on the driver anyway, huh?
Well, that could be part of it, too. You never know.
Connie, now, after you've made a run, although this wasn't a completed run, what is the process you go through? And do you go tear down your engine, clean it out completely, or is it just a routine check?
No, it's just a routine check. We check all the spark plugs and make sure that we had proper combustion in each one of the cylinders and there's nothing going on wrong. We check whether to make sure we had a proper fuel ratio in the engine at that particular moment. We set the lash on the valves to make sure nothing is closed up from the extreme temperature. Pack the parachute, check the tire pressure, put a new load of fuel in the car, and give it a cold dose of water to get it cool again, and she's ready to run.
Connie, you were paid a great tribute as the public address announcer mentioned your name and your car moving up into that Christmas tree affair. All the people around the track ran to see your run, and of course they were disappointed as you were. They look upon you as the champion in many regards. Does this put any added pressure upon you?
To a certain extent, there's a lot of problems involved in something like this. It's a big meet. There's a lot of tension. We have the problems to work out with the car. About 3 days ago, I was running at Salt Lake City, and it's 4,000 feet up there, and this affects the car also. Now I'm getting the car turned back around for this conditions here, and I'll set the car up, and I'm quite sure the next one will be a lot better.
Connie, championship racers require top-notch power. What's the source of energy for your machine?
Dick, I use a brand new 1965 overhead cam Ford engine. This engine has been working extremely well. It makes terrific horsepower, and it's been living. It's been giving me real good results.
What's the top-notch speed that you might attain with this engine?
Well, I hope for 210, and 2 weeks ago, I turned 209.78, just 1 point away from it on the clocks.
Well, good luck to you, Connie.
I sure appreciate it. Thank you, Dick, and nice talking to you.
Connie Kalita, and now let's go back out and check the action on the track. Stopping a dragster is like the days of the Old West. At over 200 miles per hour, it's shoot first, hit the brakes later. And they don't always go straight. Watch it. Is he in trouble? He's got to hold it straight, for if he crosses the center line, the car is disqualified from competition. Come for eliminations. Some cars are still in trouble, and the pits are a beehive of activity as mechanics try their best to meet the deadline, which may be only minutes away. These experienced hands can tear down an engine, rebuild it in a matter of minutes. If necessary, they'll replace an entire engine. Well, after all, they usually have at least an hour to change engines, and they get lots of practice racing every weekend. Where the right hand has to know what the left hand is doing, because teamwork really counts when the chips are down. Here a car that has been eliminated is being stripped, and the rear end is being borrowed to be installed in another dragster, one that's still in the running. Even the spectators in the pits sweat it out with the mechanics. teams all together. They've changed the rear end and can now rush to the staging area to meet the deadline for elimination. Now the long wait, the lull before the storm. They look relaxed, but they're plenty worried about the important races that are coming up. After all, the Hot Rod Magazine Championship Drag Race is one of the big races of the year, and these drivers have been preparing for it for months at the top strips throughout the country. Here's Tony Nancy, a young Southern Californian who's been driving his 22 junior dragsters for years. He's one of those who favors the gas dragsters. They don't go as fast as the fuelers, usually about 190 miles per hour, but their show of racing skill is equally as exciting as the Big Brother fuel cars, with elapsed times for the 1,320-foot distance hovering in the 8-second bracket. Easy racing down the drag strip, but for every race, dozens of hands shuffle about quickly to maintain exacting records of each performance. The Cron Deck time clocks, speed clocks, and the electronic judger all have to be watched and read carefully. They are. Bad case of injectoritis. Now we know why they put blinders on horses. One big feature in drag racing: anyone can win. It's been proven time and time again as a dark horse entry, seldom heard from in previous weeks, rolls up to the starting line on the final round of elimination, ready to go for the top prizes. Such was the case with Nando Hassi, a young driver just getting his start in big-time professional drag racing. Nando survived one of the toughest fields of cars ever assembled to emerge the winner of the Hot Rod Magazine Championship drag races. His consistent performances and dependable engine and car resulted in this young Southern Californian's biggest win. Time for the awards and honors. Nando Hassi and crew chief John Smizer receive awards from the Queen, Bob Peterson, president of Peterson Publishing Company, and publisher Ray Brock. The winner's circle is filled with excitement and glory for the drivers who claim the biggest victories of their careers. Out of 500 entries, or even 1,000, there can be only about 80 winners. Someone has to lose. But the drag racers never give up. They're a determined lot, always anxious to go back and try again, and they do. They didn't win today, so they'll take home their cars to try to find out why. But they'll be back in the running on the next weekend when the Christmas tree flashes its first countdown to signal the start of another race. That's drag racing, a sport for everyone from 16 to 60 years old, a fun sport which appeals to the youth of America out of an urge to do things mechanical with their own hands, to learn about the workings of a car, and then go out to the drag strip, the proving grounds of their ability.